Homeless man asks Warren Buffett, "Can you give me $10?" Warren Buffett response will shock everyone. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Do you believe in God? If yes, like and subscribe. The sun was beginning to set over the bustling city streets, casting long shadows on the pavement. Among the crowd of people rushing to their destinations, a man sat on the corner of the sidewalk, his clothes worn and his face lined with exhaustion. He clutched a small cardboard sign that read, "Hungry. Anything helps." His eyes scanned the passing faces, hoping for even the smallest gesture of kindness. As the minutes ticked by, the man grew more hesitant. He had been sitting there for hours, and most people had passed him by without a glance. A few had thrown quick, judgmental looks his way, their expressions a mixture of pity and disdain. The weight of their silence was heavier than their words would have been. He adjusted his position, trying to ignore the gnawing hunger in his stomach. Gathering what little courage he had left, he decided to try something different. Spotting a man walking down the street, dressed simply, but carrying himself with an air of calm confidence, the homeless man hesitated. There was nothing intimidating about this man, yet he felt unsure. People like him rarely paid attention to someone like him. The man stopped near a street vendor, looking at a newspaper stand. His presence was unassuming, but something about him drew the attention of those nearby. The homeless man took a deep breath and stood up slowly. His hands trembled slightly as he approached, his voice barely audible over the noise of the city. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his tone soft but desperate. I hate to bother you, but could you spare $10? I need something to eat." The man turned toward him, his eyes meeting the homeless man's with a steady, kind gaze. He didn't rush to answer, taking a moment to really look at him. The silence between them stretched just long enough to make the homeless man feel like he had made a mistake. "I'm sorry," the homeless man added quickly, stepping back slightly. "I shouldn't have asked." But the man shook his head gently, a faint smile appearing on his face. "You don't have to apologize," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "What's your name?" The question caught the homeless man off guard. He blinked, unsure how to respond. Most people didn't ask for his name. They barely even looked at him. It's Michael," he said hesitantly. The man nodded. "Michael," he repeated thoughtfully. "It's nice to meet you. My name's Warren." Michael didn't recognize the name, but something about Warren's demeanor made him feel at ease. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like someone actually saw him. Warren reached into his pocket, pulling out a crisp bill, but instead of handing it over immediately, he paused, as if considering something deeper. Warren held the bill in his hand, studying Michael carefully. His gaze wasn't judgmental. It was curious, almost thoughtful. "You asked for $10, Warren said gently. "But what would you do if I gave you more than that?" Michael froze, unsure of how to respond. His mind raced with possibilities, but he hesitated, fearing that the wrong answer might make Warren change his mind. I'd buy food," he said quickly, his voice trembling. "Maybe save a little if I can." Warren's faint smile widened just a bit. "Food's a good choice," he said, nodding. "But what about after that? What happens tomorrow?" The question caught Michael off guard. He looked down, his shoulders slumping under the weight of it. "Tomorrow's the same as today, I guess," he mumbled, "just trying to get by." Warren stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Michael could hear. "Michael," he said, "do you believe things can change? That your tomorrow could be better than today?" Michael blinked, feeling a strange mix of hope and skepticism. "I want to," he admitted. "But it's hard. People don't see you when you're like this. They don't care." Warren's expression softened, a flicker of something personal crossing his face. He handed Michael the $10 bill, but then he reached into his wallet again and pulled out a few more. The crisp bills felt almost surreal in Michael's hand. "That's for today," Warren said, gesturing to the money. "To get you through the night." Michael stammered a thank you, his voice shaking. He started to say more, but Warren raised a hand gently, stopping him. "But there's something else I want to offer," Warren continued. "A chance to change tomorrow." Michael frowned, unsure what he meant. "What do you mean?" he asked. Warren reached into his pocket again and pulled out a small business card. The simple white card had only a name and a phone number printed on it. Warren handed it to Michael, his eyes steady and kind. "This is my assistant's number," he explained. "Call it tomorrow morning. Tell them I sent you. We'll find a way to help you take the next step, not just for today, but for the future." Michael stared at the card, disbelief etched across his face. "Why would you do this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You don't even know me." Warren smiled, his tone calm and certain. "Because I see someone who's trying," he said. "And sometimes, all it takes is for someone else to believe in you." Michael felt a lump rise in his throat. He clutched the card tightly, his mind racing with emotions he hadn't felt in years. Hope, gratitude, and a spark of something he couldn't quite name. I'll call," he promised. "I won't waste this." Warren nodded, stepping back. "That's all I ask," he said. "Take care, Michael." As Warren turned to leave, Michael stood frozen, watching him disappear into the crowd. For a moment, the chaos of the city faded, leaving only the card in his hand, and the strange sense that his life had just shifted in a way he couldn't fully understand. Michael stood on the sidewalk, still gripping the card, as if it might vanish at any moment. The weight of what had just happened settled over him slowly, disbelief mixing with a faint flicker of hope. For years, he had been invisible, a shadow among the bustling city streets. But this man, Warren, had not only seen him, but offered him something more than a meal. He had offered a chance. As the evening turned into night, Michael used the money to buy a hot meal, for the first time in weeks. The warm food filled his stomach, but the sense of possibility filled something deeper, something he hadn't realized was so empty. He tucked the card into his pocket, checking on it every few minutes, as if to reassure himself it was real. The next morning, Michael woke early, more determined than he had felt in years. He found a payphone near a convenience store and pulled out the card, his fingers trembling as he dialed the number. The phone rang twice before a clear, professional voice answered. "Hello? This is the office of Warren Buffett," the voice said. Michael hesitated, the words catching in his throat. He had never called a number like this before, and he felt out of place even hearing it ring. Finally, he cleared his throat. Hi," he said nervously. "My name is Michael, Warren. He gave me this number and told me to call." There was a brief pause on the other end. Then the tone shifted, becoming warmer. "Ah, yes. Mr. Buffett mentioned you might call. Hold on one moment." The line clicked, and Michael waited, his heart pounding. Moments later, another voice came on the line, this one familiar. "Michael," Warren's calm voice said. "I'm glad you called." Michael couldn't believe he was actually speaking to him again. I didn't think you'd remember," he admitted. "Of course I do," Warren replied. "I told you yesterday that I believed in you, and I meant it. Now let's talk about how we can help you move forward. Over the next few minutes, Warren outlined a plan. He offered to connect Michael with a local organization that provided housing and job training for people in need. Warren's assistant would ensure Michael got there and had everything he needed to get started. "I'll make sure the first few months are covered," Warren said, his voice steady. "After that, it's up to you. But I have a feeling you'll do just fine." Michael felt tears prick his eyes as he listened. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice shaking. "No one's ever done anything like this for me." "You don't need to thank me," Warren said gently. "Just make the most of it. And when you're in a position to help someone else, remember this moment." Michael promised he would, his heart swelling with gratitude. As he hung up the phone, he realized that for the first time in years, he had a path forward, a chance to rebuild his life. Months later, Michael stood in a small but tidy apartment, a place he could finally call home. He had a steady job and a renewed sense of purpose. On his dresser sat a framed copy of the card Warren had given him, along with a handwritten note he had written to himself. "Kindness changes everything." And somewhere, Warren Buffett walked through another city, blending into the crowd as he always did. He wasn't looking for recognition or praise. He simply believed in the quiet power of seeing someone, truly seeing them, and offering them a chance to change their tomorrow. As Michael stood in his small apartment, staring at the card framed on his dresser, he felt a surge of emotion wash over him. It wasn't just gratitude, it was a profound sense of renewal. For years, he had drifted through life, invisible to most, defined by his circumstances. But one moment, one act of kindness, had rewritten his story. He walked to the window, looking out at the city that had once felt so cold and unwelcoming. Now, it felt different. The streets below weren't just a reminder of where he had been. They were a symbol of how far he had come. He thought about Warren Buffett's words, how they had lit a fire within him that he hadn't realized still existed. In that quiet moment, Michael made a promise to himself. He would keep moving forward, not just for his own sake, but for the chance to someday pass on the same kindness that had been shown to him. He didn't know when or how, but he knew he would find a way. Meanwhile, Warren Buffett walked through another bustling street in another city, his simple presence blending seamlessly into the crowd. He didn't need recognition or fanfare. He understood that the true value of wealth wasn't in dollars or status. It was in moments like these, where a little belief and compassion could change someone's life forever. And for Michael, that moment was more than enough to prove that kindness wasn't just a gesture. It was a lifeline. As he closed the window and turned back to his room, his future no longer felt like an endless question mark. It felt like a promise.